I went from being a nobody in poker to being one of the most famous players. And not to mention, I just won $1.7 million when I had about $40,000 to my name prior. A lot of people describe, life is like a game of chess. But I disagree. I love chess too. I wish life was like a game of chess. The problem of censorship is much worse and scarier than the problem of people getting hoodwinked by bad information.
Liv, I have one more big question for you. Liv, are you a feminist? Are you an anti-feminist feminist? Or are you a traditionalist? Well, hello, Liv. Thank you so much for coming. I've been wanting to have you on for a long, long, long time. I've been having a girl crush without you knowing. I'm just kidding.
I love that. I'm all for it. Thank you.
All right, Liv, I think you're definitely one of the more fascinating women, and I like to use the word women here, but in general, definitely one of the more fascinating women that, I've met. So I wanted for you to share your story with people, because then I think they get to see why. And then I have, of course, tons of questions, much more pointed questions. Mm-hmm.
All right, my story. Grew up in the countryside of England.
Mm-hmm.
Really loved physics, so I went and studied that at university.
Mm-hmm.
Graduated, had plans of continuing on in academia, but then needed to find a way to make some money. My parents were breathing down my neck to get a job, and I was resisting the idea of working in an office as long as possible. It did not appeal, so I started applying for TV game shows instead, much to their horror. And it was on one of these game shows that I first learned how to play this game of poker. And I remember there was an advert saying, could you use your powers of skill and deception to win £100,000, which is a huge amount of money, especially for a graduate in debt. And it sounded so intriguing. So I applied, and the premise of the show, they were looking for 5 beginners who had never played poker before. So they wouldn't actually tell us what it was we were going to be doing until day one of the show. And they wanted 5 beginners to see which personality type was best suited to play poker. And even though I didn't win that show in the end, it was like a light bulb moment the first time I actually played and felt the cards in my hand and understood what the goal of the game was. And so I after that,
what was the goal of the game? Because for many people who don't understand poker or think they know what poker is, this is what's exciting because so what's the goal of the game?
Yeah, so poker really, it's a goal. Well, on the surface level, the goal is to win as many chips, which usually represent money, from your opponents as possible, and lose as few of your own money to back to them. And you do this by betting with your money on how strong you think your cards are compared to theirs. So that's what it is on the surface level, but more deeply than that, really what poker is a game of is, well, it's many things, but it's about mentally modeling other people and evaluating all these different bits of information, these different types of information under extreme uncertainty and extreme pressure, because you don't have much time to make these decisions and it's your real hard-earned cash on the line. And so it's a kind of game of wits and nerve and mathematics and logic and psychology and emotional control, understanding what your opponents are thinking and feeling, but also understanding what you're thinking and feeling and being aware of your own biases and motivations and errors. And so what I loved about poker so much is that it reflected the messiness of life, because a lot of people describe, life is like a game of chess. You've got to out strategy your opponents. But I disagree. I love chess too, but I wish life was like a game of chess where everyone has the same information. So it's just you're playing against one person and there's no luck. The best player always wins. But in life is messy. There is randomness. There is uncertainty. There is deception. And that's what poker has in droves. So that's why I think it's a superior game. I'm probably going to get a lot of angry chess players, but I think it's one of the most superior games because it is the closest reflection to what goes on in life and the types of decisions we have to make in life. So anyway, bowing back to my story, I fall in love with the game so much that I decide to put physics on hold to see if I can make it as a professional. I do get a normal job for a little while, working in an office for about a year. But in the back of my mind, I was like, I need to be a poker pro. I want to travel the world. It seems like such a fun lifestyle. I've made some friends who were sort of going on tour every now and then.
Mhm.
So I made it my goal to become. I remember at one point going, I want to be the most famous female poker player on earth.
Have you not
And
become? Have you not
huh?
become? Have you not become?
Probably. Certainly
Okay.
one of them. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
maybe it's hard to measure, but certainly top three.
Mm-hmm.
And so, uh, yeah, I turned professional and I end up having the career of my dreams, and I end up playing for about 12 years on the circuit.
Wow.
And I mean, maybe we can get to what I'm doing now later on. Let's stick with poker.
Yeah, yeah. That's rather quite a story right there. And then, so what do you think, Liv, about your education and or maybe your upbringing, got you ready for becoming a world class poker player? Like, what do you think contributed to help you be that great modeler? What you said it? Yeah, you said modeling other people. Uh, It doesn't just come like that, and I don't think it came through the you know just being on these games on TV. It seems to me like something must have started way earlier in you to prepare you for this.
Yeah, so I've always been very analytical
Mhm.
to do physics. You need to be comfortable with analyzing things logically. You have to learn the scientific method. Um, it's a highly mathematical degree, so I think that gave me a solid foundation in terms of you need to be a top poker player or a good poker player. You need to be willing to really nerd out. You have to just go deep and get almost obsessive with a very abstract mathematical game, which
Mhm.
physics is also requires those kinds of skills. So that was one part of it. But frankly, I think the more important part is that I was from a very young age, as early as I can remember, I was so competitive. I just
Oh,
had to be the best at whatever was going on. If it was a running race, if it was who could get the highest score on a test, provided it was something that I cared about sufficiently. There were some things, probably thinking about it, it was the things I wasn't very good at that I was like, oh, these aren't important. So I didn't necessarily care about those and I wouldn't be competitive about them. But anything that I felt like I had a chance of winning at, I had to win at. And poker, if you want to play at the top levels of poker, you need to be competitive. You need to be cutthroat. You need to not only be willing to dive in and study the game deeply, but you have to have that burning desire to outwit and outmaneuver your opponents. So, what it was in my childhood that made me competitive like that, I don't know. I wish I've tried to figure it out because my mom's kind of competitive. Like I grew up doing competitive equestrian sport, and my mom definitely encouraged that. And then my dad was also competitive in other things, like definitely academically. He wanted, he was always pushing me. Well, were you the best in your class at that? And I think he instilled a lot of that in me as well. But it really feels like something that was core to my being. I just
mhm.
always obsessed with metrics and being the best, which, as we can get into, wasn't always a healthy thing. In fact, I'd say it could be quite unhealthy as a mindset. But
Mhm.
nonetheless, that's what my sort of a very defining feature of my personality was up until probably my mid-20s, at least.
Interesting, and like you said, we're going to go into that for sure. But before that, I'm just very curious here, and this is taking us a little bit more into the future, hopefully. Um, if you had to, if you had to instill the good attributes of what we just talked about into your children, whenever they come to you,
Mm.
or if they come to you,
Mhm.
how would you go about it? Because personally, I do talk to a lot of people who are interested in how is it that we instill some of these values, because I call them values. They're what you described. There's a lot of great values there. So how would or could someone go intentionally about it in terms of fostering a child, to get to that place?
Yeah,
Or do
great
you
question.
disagree? Or do you think it's not something advisable?
Mm. Well, I mean, I haven't had children yet, but if or when I do, I would want them to have a degree of self-awareness about their own relationship with competition more than I had, definitely. It was something that it just was. Oh, you're entering a competition. Well, you have to be one of the key things. So there's different ways competition can manifest, and I think the people who have the healthiest relationship with it are ultimately the people who learn as early as possible that they're not competing necessarily against others, they're competing against themselves. Now, others might be involved within the competition in order for you to, as a way to evaluate how you're doing against yourself. But I didn't learn that for a long time. And I think that's where the unhealthy manifestations of competition come from in a large part. Is the focus on the validation of whether or not you did well comes from an external place as opposed to an internal place. Now, that's not to say that you couldn't get to an unhealthy relationship with focusing only against yourself too. Like, I think with all things, if you take it to the extreme, it will become toxic. But certainly for me, I wasn't like, oh, well, last time on this test, I got 60 out of 100, and this time I got 90. I would have been more like, well, last time I came fourth out of 30 in my classmates, and this time I came first. And that was more my obsession. And that is where I think a lot of the unhealthiness comes from. So I would want to encourage, first of all, my children to be aware that competition is a tool of interaction. It's a way of interacting with others. But you have a choice. There is an ability to choose how you use that tool, and that tool can be for good, and it can create good outcomes, and it can create bad outcomes depending on how it's done. So that'd be step one. And then the second thing is I would probably want to teach them as early as possible that focusing on your own internal process is more important than looking at the external results of how you do against others. At least focus on what is your process. So that's one of the things that comes back to poker. I had a coach who worked more on mindset for a while. He wasn't working on how you play the game, but just more about your process, your mindset with yourself. And one of the things he said, his name is Steven Simpson, and it was one of the mantras he helped me develop was, I will focus only on that which I can control. If I focus on what I can control and focus on my process, the results will take care of themselves. Because the thing is, in poker, and again, with like so many things in life, you can play absolutely perfectly and the cards will just screw you over anyway. You get your money in as a like 97% favorite, and that 3% will come in. And there's nothing you did wrong. You did everything absolutely perfectly, but you still get screwed over. And that can really, really hurt not only your bottom line if that keeps happening, because sometimes people go on really big runs of bad luck, but it can hurt your self-confidence. It can make you hate the universe. It can make you feel like you're being punished in some way, and you can get these sort of paranoid feelings. And so it's extremely important to develop a solid process that is agnostic to how the cards actually come, how the luck plays out, how the results play out, and evaluate whether or not you had a good day playing purely upon, did I follow how my process is meant to be? Were my emotions correctly calibrated? Was my thinking process optimized for the certain situation? If no, okay, well, now I can be mad at myself a little bit. Let's go and focus. That's something to improve. If yes, pat myself on the back. Now, did I end up winning money or losing money? That's somewhat incidental. Did I follow my process? And so that kind of process-based thinking as opposed to results-based thinking, again, I didn't learn that until a lot later in life. And I think that would have been really helpful to know earlier on in life, because it just helps you, it just makes you more, again, you will find validation from within yourself as opposed to needing it from the outside.
That makes a lot of sense. And so for you, it seems like you did not always understand that. So what happened between that very competitive Liv, but competitiveness unchecked? It seems like that's what you seem to describe. So what happened in between? Like, it seems like some type of consciousness happened somewhere.
Hmm.
So what happened, if you don't mind me
What
asking?
happened? So it's hard to pin down on any like precise moment. I mean, I had a number of things happen. So quite early on in my career, poker career in 2010, I won a huge tournament, like in the biggest tournament that had ever been held in Europe up to that point. It was a European Poker Tour Championship, had over 1,200 entrants. I was still a fairly novice player, but through a combination, I mean, I played very well, but I also got extremely lucky, because you have to get lucky to win a big tournament like that. Everything just went right. That's all I can say. And I ended up winning this huge thing. And it was amazing, because now I went from being a nobody in poker to being one of the most famous players, certainly during that time. I got sponsorship deals being thrown at me left and right. Not to mention, I just won $1.7 million when I had about $40,000 to my name prior. So like just a complete life blow up, basically. But what was interesting was what then happened over the next year after that point, because it went to my head, basically, for want of a better phrase. I started, because everyone was telling me, oh, you must be so unbelievably talented, and you're like the God's gift to the game, essentially. I started internalizing and believing that I must just be the best in the world. And so I started playing in bigger, tougher tournaments against really the best in the world. And also the cards, there's such a thing as regression to the mean. And my results started being less than desirable. And I lost, I started losing quite a bit of that money back that I had won. I mean, not, it was a fairly small chunk. I was being still quite cautious, but nonetheless, I was expecting, oh, now I know how to win tournaments, I'm going to keep winning tournaments. And that did not happen. And I needed a really big wake up call about a year later, when some friends talked to me and they're like, look, yes, you did well, but don't get deluded by that one incredible result. You've got to keep studying you've got to keep working, you've got to keep studying. And so that was the first sort of little life lesson, I would say, that poker, sort of slapped me around the face. And it was like, you got a great run of good fortune and you played well, but that's not going to keep happening. You want to have consistent results, you need to keep grinding and working. So that was the first one. What else? I guess as I got older, certainly around 2014, I got involved met some philosophers, basically, who were very interested in philanthropy. And they, I mean, a lot of people might have heard of it at this point. Unfortunately, it's now getting a lot of negative attention, these concepts, because of Sam Bankman-Fried and doing a huge fraud and ripping a bunch of people off in the name of this type of philanthropy, unfortunately. But this type of philanthropy known as effective altruism, I got introduced to it in 2014. And prior to that, I'd always been interested in charity a little bit, and I'd always particularly been attracted towards environmental charities and animal rights charities, but I'd never had any sort of coherentness to my giving. It was just very random, ad hoc. I would see an upsetting TV, ad on TV about abused donkeys in Egypt or something like that, and they're like, "Oh, I've got to donate something," and that would be it. It was a very reactive type of philanthropy. So, learning about this in 2014, basically, the concept is there are so many different problems in the world. And we only have limited resources that we can donate, whether it's our time or our money. How do we figure out which problems to prioritize?
Right.
And once we figure out which problems, how do we figure out the most effective way of actually then using our resources to fix those problems? So basically all it is like a framework of logical steps to try and most effectively make the world a better place. And this really resonated as a poker player, which is all about being rational. You're thinking about your ROI in a given situation, cost effectiveness, game selection, looking for leaks, finding, essentially employing the scientific method. This finally was a way to do good that spoke my language, and it made a lot of sense. So I started some friends of my friends and my partner Igor and I, we started a movement within the poker community called Raising for Effective Giving, to encourage poker players when they win big to donate a portion of that to the most cost-effective charities, according to basically the methods, the scientific methods that are used to try and assess that to donate money to them. So that was another kind of moment where, because what essentially that did was take a very zero-sum game, the living definition of a zero-sum game, poker. My win, when I win money, it's because it's literally come out of someone else's pile of money.
Right.
And this was a way to turn the zero-sum game of poker into a clearly positive-sum enterprise, because the money that people win, you encourage them to donate it, and it goes to a really effective place. Incidentally, a lot of the top charities happen to be in Africa, because the money can go really, really far there. And I'm sure we'll get into that. So that was another one, realizing that, like, wait, there's a way to use zero-sum games if you design what you then do with the outcomes of those, or if you think consciously about what you do with them, to make them into a positive sum venture. So that was another one. And then, I don't know, there was just something, as I got older, I started to mellow. I just became less competitive. Again, it was about, I started to become more conscious of, like, wait, competition doesn't have to be about crushing your enemies. It can be about improving upon yourself. Or there are games out there that are strictly win-win. And you can choose which ones do you want to put your energy into, zero sum, into win-lose games, or lose-win games, or lose-lose games, or do you want to go out and find which ones are win-win and focus your energy on that? So I wish I could say there was like a strict light bulb moment. I went to Burning Man a bunch, psychedelic journeys. There was just lots of little things that just slowly, I would say, shifted my awareness into realizing that there are bigger games out there to play. So yeah, that's a very long-winded answer to that question, but hopefully
no, I think it's great. I mean, it's great. I can only imagine, and it only makes sense that these type of processes would take time. I'm actually glad to hear that it was something that happened over time. It makes much more sense. Now, going back to EA, Liv, how do you feel, or how do you look at the way it seems like, we went from, helping the global poor to now, moving on to more like long-termism, right? So for me, when I look at EA, the reason why I was super excited by EA when it got started was because, especially, they cared about the rest of the world. They seemed to me like a bunch of people who cared because of what they focused on. And I definitely also enjoyed the fact that they were focused on effectiveness, because as we all know, the world of philanthropy to this day is very
hot mess.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a hot mess.
I mean, really, it's a hot mess. And so, oftentimes led by emotions only, the mind is out, checked out of the door. It's just a disaster. So you guys bringing this concept of the heart working with the mind, I think it was just like a brilliant move. And of course, I could only agree. So I was like a big time, ha. And then eventually, I don't know what happened. This is what I would love for you to help me understand, and those of us who are interested in EA, because I haven't given up on EA, honestly, unless, in my mind, they're going to want to stick to long-termism. So somewhere along the line, somehow, we turned up, it looks like, and so I'm going to say just it looks like, from my perspectives, because I don't want to judge. I mean, it's not, yeah. So it looks like for me, they turned their back on the global poor. And now all of a sudden, we went from caring about the global poor, it was all about, how can we help poor people, to now, I care more about geeks, and how can we help geeks, create more, technology. And then I felt like it made it feel so less humane for me. And sometimes I don't throw this word around easily. Sometimes I'm like, I won't say it, but let's just say it just started feeling less humane for me.
Got it.
So tell me. So have you? Am I? Because you're into it. You're in the heart of EA, so you know exactly what's going on. So am I? Did something get distorted from where I'm looking at it from? Am I completely wrong? Did something like this happen? No.
So, okay, well, all I can do is give you a combination of my experience and some actual numbers, because I think ultimately, we can talk about how it feels, but let's actually, the numbers are what matters. Like, because what is EA trying to? Well, so first of all, there's two things. I think it's worth splitting out EA, or effective altruism, as the set of principles, which is basically like, there are many problems in the world. We have finite resources. We should therefore think consciously about how we deploy those resources. Right. And I guess another principle is saving or helping more people is better than helping fewer people. That's another one. Like, some people actually just disagree with that. They think it's maybe better to just help a small number of people and not help the masses, and so on. But EA, one of its principles is help more people rather than fewer. Resources are finite, therefore we should deploy them as effectively as possible. We should be as agnostic as possible about causes, in terms of like, we need to be careful to not get overly attached to one particular cause if it turns out that cause isn't actually doing a good job. Because that's, I think, a big problem with a lot of philanthropy. It's just like, people will get attached to their pet thing and go all in on that. And then even if it turns out it's actually harming the world, they'll continue because it's like they've gotten so much of their identity wrapped up in it. So those are some of the core principles. That's EA as principles. Out of those principles, a movement grew. And over time, that movement became more calcified, and it became more associated with the actual people, and so on. And I think there's some, always, whenever a movement gets to a certain size, then social dynamics and like essentially like entrenchments can happen, which I think can make things less than optimal than they should be. So that's, first of all, two things. But I guess to try and, my first thing I would say to, has EA become, it feels to you like it's become all about long-termism. It's definitely true that, like, so I think we should define what long-termism is, because I think a lot of people probably don't know what that means. But from how I understand it, and again, I'm not actually that deeply entrenched in EA. I've always been kind of somewhat on the sidelines a little bit, but I guess I would describe myself as someone who deeply agrees with the principles. I have not so much been, as, again, I haven't been deeply entrenched in the movement. So that's, I should just caveat that. But long-termism, as I understand it, is the idea that there are, let's say, 8 billion people alive today. Assuming things go well, and we continue existing as a species for thousands of years, there are going to be a lot more people in the future than there are alive today. And how we evaluate their weight, their moral weight, is TBD. But the point is, those people are probably worth something. Just as we value the people in our family more than the stranger on the street, and we probably value the stranger on the street more than we value a stranger on the other side of the world, there's some kind of like moral discount rate that we give. We should probably give some kind of value. We probably give more value to our unborn children than we would to our unborn great grandkids. So there's some kind of discount rate. But what long-termism argues is that because the moral weight of future people isn't literally zero, there is something, and there's going to hopefully be so many more of them than there are alive today, that we should probably give them a bit more consideration than we currently are, which, given the way we're treating the earth right now, and the way we're kind of on this, like, essentially a carbon coke binge of going nuts, which, don't get me wrong, I love it, where I'm living the fruits of it right here in my like nice house with aircon, and I'm able to speak to you through all this technology and so on. We aren't treating the home that we need to live on, the planet, as well as we should be, and that is potentially putting future generations deeply at risk. So what long-termism actually then boils down to is, like, because these people have moral weight, and B, that we're treating the future very callously. We are externalizing lots of cost to the future. We should probably think more about how to fix our current methods so that those people actually get to live. So I think that makes sense like that. Now, some people would argue, because basically the straw man that I've been hearing in the media about what long-termism is that because there are so many people in the future, and the future could be really cool, it doesn't matter about the people today. We should focus all our efforts on that. Now, that is not, I've met the people, like I know Will MacAskill, who wrote the book on long-termism. I know that is absolutely dead wrong about what that is not at all what he is advocating for. He's simply saying the future matters. We're currently acting like they don't matter at all. If we carry on the way we're going, we may well not either. We might either completely wreck the planet, and so only a few people can live, or we might completely extinct ourselves entirely. This would be a real fucking shame. Let's not do that. So let's focus some proportion of our resources into building a more sustainable future. So I think that's something that most people would agree with. So that's what long-termism really is, as far as I know, from the people who talk about it. So that's the first thing. But then secondly, how much of EA has become focused on that? Well, I've just pulled up the numbers, and you should probably share this in the podcast. I can send you the link.
Yes, please do.
I guess I'll ask you first. What proportion of funding, of like donations that EA has given, do you think has gone to long-termism?
I don't know exactly. For me, the way I'm looking at it is not so much about how much has gone to long-termism since EA started. My intuition is more that from the beginning of EA till maybe 3, 4, 5 years ago, maybe the bulk of the money was going to typical philanthropy, like
Africa,
Africa in general.
Mm-hmm.
And then I feel so. Then from where I'm sitting, it seems to me like maybe 3, 4, 5 years ago, then that ratio of donations started to go down compared to how much was given to long-term projects. To long-termist projects. So that's more how I would be thinking about it. So I wouldn't say that since the inception of EA, most of the money went to long-termism, but I wouldn't be surprised if I was to hear that, like I said, that window 3, 5 years ago, something, the ratio started to shift. That's
totally. Yeah. So you're definitely correct that the ratio shifted. Basically in 2014 and 15, it was basically 100% of funds went to global health and development, which was Africa. I've just sent you the link, by the way, in your iMessages. If you want to just look at the image, it might make it easier.
Yeah.
So yeah, you can see in 2014 and 15, 100% went to global health and development. 2016, some animal welfare started getting a bit more, a few other small, like some long-termism and catastrophic risk reduction. And basically, so you're right that an increasing proportion has gone to reducing catastrophic risks and long-termism, which is essentially the same thing, basically. But still, way over half, well, not way over half, even to this day, is still going to global health and development. But more crucially, the more important thing is that the amount, the pie itself of money that is being donated at all has, what is it, like 20x, probably more. And the point is that compared to 2014, which is when the graph starts, to today, or 2022, I guess it's not today, the amount that is going to Africa has more than 10x. So I think it's a little unfair to say, oh, it's become obsessed with long-termism or whatever, when the entire movement is giving 10 times more than it ever has to Africa, and there's like distinctly like fixing human related problems now. So that's why I like it. Like it makes me sad that it's getting shat on for it's growing. It more and more and more money is going to those. It's still more than half. Plus that new money that has now basically been generated, because it's not like it's taking money, again, the pie's not fixed. It's generated more money to like AI safety and these kind of things, simply because no one was giving to those. And some people have gone and focused on that. So it's really not, it would be an example of this as false zero sumness. All that's happened is that it's raised awareness of a range of really important issues, and giving to one doesn't mean you're not giving to the other. In fact, they complement each other. We need to be fixing both. There's no point fixing Africa if we all die 2 years later because of a nuclear war or some man-made pandemic that could have been avoided if we had just spent a little bit of money on better regulation on DNA synthesis and so on. And that's what upset. It drives me crazy that people are like, well, that money could have gone to Africa. It's like, it's pointless if that. But you do raise a very good point, which is, and this is where like the Sam Bankman-Fried problem came up, right? If you become too overly focused on like topics of existential risk, well, now you run the risk of falling into the ends justify the means type behavior, because it's like you're getting Pascal's mugs. I'm sure if people don't know, that's the idea of like God comes and puts a gun to your head and it's like, I'm going to kill you if you don't give me $10 or $100. It's like, well, of course you're going to do it because you just like the downsides seem uncapped, so it can justify you doing anything even if you don't agree with it. And I don't really know SBF. I met him a couple of times, but from what I can tell, either the guy was just a straight up fraud and liar in the first place from the outset, or he got twisted by this kind of ends justify the means thinking. And that is a real issue. And I hope and believe, as far as I can tell, that the EA movement is doing some serious reckoning of how they got hoodwinked by someone who fell so victim to that type of very twisted thinking. So I hope that sort of sheds some light on.
Oh, I am so glad that I asked you that question, because you definitely did change some of my mind on this. So I am delighted to hear that the commitment to the global poor and solving that problem is still there within EA people. And I mean, don't take me wrong. I do agree. And that's the other thing. I was talking to Igor about it the other day. For those who don't know, Igor is your partner. And, he was saying, Magatte, because, people hear me complain about aid as we know it. And he was like, but you don't object to, anti-malaria nets being distributed to people, do you? And I said, absolutely not. But the issue that I have is when 100%, well, in this case, when it comes to aid and aid especially, most of efforts and resources, time, pretty much everything we have, which is in a way, which is finite, like you were saying, a good chunk of it, 80% of that is going towards fixing the Band-Aid, giving somebody food because they're dying of hunger. Meanwhile, who is working on solving the long-termism, problems here,
Systemic
right?
issues.
Systemic issues, who is working on it? And I said, to me, I just wanted to see the ratios be a little bit better calibrated. So that way we're not always fixed on, just solving the same problem and, which is bound to repeat itself. So in this case, obviously, when we think about what type of, and this goes into that, I know you asked me about this, but now I'm going to turn around and ask you about it, which is, how does EA, especially if they keep on giving so much? So bottom line is, I'm very glad I asked this question. Very happy by the answer that I heard from you. I think at some point what's going on is, because the news is always, at least related to that community, is always about AI, all the long-termist, issues. It seems like they have completely departed from everything else, and they're just obsessed with these things, So, yeah.
That's the problem, unfortunately, with the media landscape. And I don't want to turn this into a shitting on the media conversation, but people, and because I notice this in myself, if I, let's say Taylor Swift or someone I don't know, anything much about, all I receive about her as information is what the media decides to pick up on and blare at me. So my opinions around her will get entirely formed by them. And that's the case, as you said yourself, that's all you've heard about from the media is them EA is all about AI safety and so on and so forth. But that is a complete distortion, because the reason why the media pick up on that is because it's a sexy story. It's this is a new, interesting thing. Unfortunately, and part of the problem why so many of these extreme poverty related, but easily solvable diseases like, schistosomia, I can never say it, the worm that gets schistosomiasis, whatever, the malaria, etc. It's these diseases have been so ongoing and, from a media perspective, boring, that no one ever talks about it. And no one ever talks about the fact that there's these very important problems being solved that have just been going on and on and on every single day. The fact that 20,000 people per day die of completely avoidable extreme poverty related problems. That's not in the news. But remember when there was the Nepal earthquake? 20,000 people died from that earthquake. That was all in the news, and it got so much money. I'm not saying it shouldn't have received help. Those people, the Nepal needed an incredible amount of help after that terrible earthquake. But the point is that one of those Nepals happens every single day, but we never hear about it because it happens every single day. And the media just pick and choose. And because AI is now suddenly the big hot topic, even though actually it's been people, smart people have been thinking about AI safety for a long, long, long time, but no one listened to them. But now, because finally AI is like, people are actually waking up, oh shit, this is coming really fast, and we're already seeing it. Now it's the hot topic. And so now the media have latched onto that, and then they've decided there's a really good boogeyman narrative that they can pick to be like, oh yeah, these EAs, they're the problem. And so it's just very, very frustrating.
No, it is frustrating, but I can totally hear the frustration. But I would also say that I would also probably encourage some EA people also to kind of try and keep the other topic on the table as well, because
totally.
There is what I hear from the media, but there is also what I hear being discussed, in conversations now when you are with people who are more or less in that community. I think they're getting caught up with the sexiness of long-termism as well. So I think in their own way, they're also contributing.
I can't speak for them, but I know in myself, like I catch what do I spend my effort thinking about? Okay, my work is specifically in like solving Moloch and these game theory problems, which are these kind of like systemic issues that are driving a lot of these technological risks. So of course I'm going to be thinking about that, but in part that is because, and now this is where everyone is human, that is a thing that is actually directly risking me. My own well-being, my own family's well-being is at threat from nuclear war or from a man-made pandemic. I try as best I can to expand my moral circle to care about poor people in Africa, and I really do try. But ultimately, I'm still a human being, and having lived through a pandemic already now, I'm like, it's become acutely aware. I'm like, oh man, if we have another one of these where it's actually like 100x the fatality rate, which is entirely possible, by the way, and it's as contagious as COVID, well, I will have to watch my loved ones and myself die. I don't want that. So in part, that's probably also what's going on. Again, I don't want to speak for them, but I know in myself, that's why I don't have as much brain space for the people suffering right now in Africa as I would like to, in part because I'm scared. I'm scared myself for my own well-being.
It's totally understandable. And I think for me, if you were to use that same scale, the reason why I worry more about, Africa is on my mind first and foremost. Maybe it's just because I'm African and I have to see it every day. When I'm heading back in a week, and I'll be facing it again in a week, right? So I think when I look at the two issues, they seem to be very close, but at the end of the day, one is right there in front of my eyes, and the other one, maybe even if it's, who knows when some nuclear bomb might explode to our faces. Who knows? Let's hope never. But for me, I think things are just so raw in terms of, like what I see now and live every day and get news on from friends and family who are going through this right now. But no, it all makes sense. Now, this takes me to the work you're doing now. Can you tell us more about that?
Sure. So it's kind of hard to describe. Well, my main thing now is I've started my own podcast called Win-Win, which you were just my last guest on, and I'm currently editing the episode of. So I guess my main focus right now is helping people understand what I think, and I could be wrong, but the main mechanisms that are driving so many of our biggest issues, whether it's deforestation, climate change, or greenhouse gas emissions, at least, plastic pollution, arms races, like scary new weapons, hypersonic missiles, etc., hypersonic nuclear missiles. From what I can see, there is a mechanism at the center of all of these problems, and it's a force of basically screwed up, misaligned game theory. Underlying so many of these problems, another one is the polarization, Democrats versus Republicans, the culture wars that we are seeing, this tearing everybody apart and creating this very like warlike mentality in everyone through not just social media, but also legacy media.
Right.
These problems all have the same root cause, which is, I guess the most succinct way of putting it is, people who are in a competitive situation where they don't necessarily want to do the shitty strategy, but if they don't do it, their competitors will probably do it themselves and get a competitive advantage. So they end up having to do it too. So let me put that into context. You own a media news outlet. Mm-hmm. You don't want to use clickbaity headlines to reel people in that, like, often they won't even, people often just read the headlines, right? And they don't actually read the rest of the article. But the fact of the matter is, the media environment is more competitive than it ever has been in history. And clickbait works in terms of getting attention. And your advertiser model is dependent on you getting clicks. So even if you don't want to use clickbait, if you don't do it, you're going to see all your competitors do it and you're going to end up going out of business. So you end up doing it too. So it creates this like negative spiral of, well, the New York Times are leaning into like riling up their Democrat, making the Republicans sound bad. So we should probably do that too, because I know our readership leads a little bit left, and it just creates more and more and more polarization. So that's one example. Mm-hmm. Or for a more classic example, when the nuclear arms race started back in the 40s and 50s in the Cold War. Mm-hmm. Oh, well, Russia now have 10 nuclear warheads. Well, we need to have more than that, because now they can get 10 cities. So we need 15. Well, Russia's like, well, the US has 15, so we need 20, and so on. Same kind of thing. You have to keep up with the Joneses. Right. Whether that's a good thing, but keeping up with the Joneses, if the Joneses are doing good stuff, that's great. You converge it, that becomes a race to the top. But if it's doing a bad thing, like, oh, well, I have a paper mill and there's a patch of forest in front of me and the competing paper mill is cutting down the forest at this rate. Well, so I have to do it even faster, and I'll have to cut down the logs and store them. So the whole forest gets destroyed far faster than it needed to, because of these incentives, these competitive incentives. Mm-hmm. So this force of misaligned short-term competitive incentives that are driving people to do this is the thing we have to figure out. Mm-hmm. And it's a very clunky, kind of non-sexy topic, but that's what my current work is focused on. Is like making people viscerally understand the real nature of the problem that is driving us. And it's something even deeper, because people then go, oh, so that's a lot of anti-capitalists will say, oh, that's capitalism doing it. Capitalism is vulnerable to it, but it is also the beauty of capitalism is it uses competition. It's a neutral tool of using competition through the process of capital allocation to build more stuff that people want. Most of the time, it is good, because what is good for people is aligned with what people want. But sometimes what we want is not actually aligned with what's good for us, and sometimes it's negatively correlated. So that's when capitalism goes wrong. That's what you get, that this concept I call Moloch. That's when you get a Moloch situation. But when the things are aligned, that's when you get a win-win. So that's what my work is about, trying to explain this to people. I'm probably not actually doing that good job right now, but I've made a lot of short films about it, and I give TED Talks and so on.
No, you actually explain it very well from that standpoint. But for me, though, where I push back on that is it capitalism going wrong, or is it people maybe needing more to deal with what might be good for people? You see, because if we put something out there, if you ask me, I would say capitalism is working, because if people without a gun to their heads are coming and accepting something, they voted. In this case, they voted with their dollars or whatever, going for it. That's why it's working. And then in return, some people might say capitalism is not working. But me, I would like to argue back. Is it capitalism not working? Or is it the people definitely showcasing bad taste and or just not doing what is right for them? So in that case, is it because somebody is using a knife the wrong way that we say the knife is not a good idea, and then we take it away from all hands? or do we try to work more on the people themselves, so that next time given a choice, maybe they make a better choice because maybe
Make a healthier choice.
healthier choice, maybe more informed, or they learn gratification delaying gratification for whatever reason, or I'm sorry, but if all you want to eat is fat and sugar, you're going to be probably super obese and all the diseases that come with it. So there I'm just a little bit because I hear what you're saying, Liv, and I could see why someone could fall on that, but are we really pointing finger in the right place?
You're exactly right to push back on it. So it's my answer is it's both.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's the system that is set up in a screwy way and pushes people into if someone take social media. Like, there's so many people I know now who are like, their number one complaint is how addicted they are to social media. I feel it myself. I'm currently on a semi 3-week cleanse from it, and I have to say I feel like I've gotten my soul back. But
tell people what it like. Some people might want to do it. Can you share what?
Well, right. Well, so what is the definition of addiction? To me, it's like when you are making a continued action, but you don't want to be making that action, but for some reason you've lost the agency to stop. It seems like because that's the thing, social media, especially now AI is getting involved and algorithms are getting more and more personalized and focused and directed. As they get more information about the way someone's brain works, the better they are at mentally modeling that individual user, the better these algorithms get at getting those users to do what they want them to. Right. Which unfortunately means as algorithm gets better and gets more capable, that comes at the cost of people's agency, right? Yeah. So that would be a case where the people themselves, the users, are essentially being a product they're having their agency stripped away. Now you could say, okay, fine, so it's still the people's fault. Sure, you could say that, but as systems become more and more and more capable, at some point, even the most enlightened people will struggle to resist it. Like, brainwashing is a thing. Even enlightened people get brainwashed sometimes. Mm-hmm. So that would be an example of like the techno-capital machine doing something which is robbing people of their agency. Yeah. Now, that doesn't always manifest that way. There's no reason to say that if we can figure out ways to better align the incentives, the techno-capital machine can be given to give people more agency. So that's why I'm not saying capitalism is to blame. It's the people using capitalism. Yes, it's the visions, it's the goals that people decide upon in the first place to use capitalism to achieve. That's the key thing. So yes, I agree with you. Ultimately, it comes down to the people using it. But sometimes the incentives are so strong that you end up being pushed into converging upon shitty goals in the first place. Sorry, you want to say something?
It makes total sense what you're saying. And what I would add to that, maybe to reconcile with you saying, okay, I agree that the people are their own problem in the first place. So I'm glad we agree on that. And the second part, I don't think we disagree so much on, but for me it's whose role and job it is. And I'm not saying that you have come up with whose role and job it is, but it's just maybe me.
Definitely not.
No, but it's but now it is now me advancing, maybe whose job I think it is. So, and this is where I've always looked at capitalism and the market, actually, because when I talk about capitalism, really what I'm talking about maybe mostly is not maybe, but for sure, it's the free markets. So if we let the market work, traditionally, smart entrepreneurs, they see a need in the market, and I would argue that today there is a strong need in the market for people to distance themselves a little bit away from social media, like you were saying. You were saying I'm on my own detox from social media. I wouldn't be surprised that very soon there are going to be some seminars organized, or some trips organized, or some the market is gonna get together and be like, oh, we see there's a need here. People are really there's feeling the need to detox. This is a new form of intoxication that has arisen. Some we may or may not argue that it's a byproduct of capitalism in the first place. But again, nothing is perfect in this world. Life is about trade-offs. You gain this, and in exchange you got this. So there too, personally, for me, I'm once again, and maybe call me a crazy cultish free market person, but I wouldn't be surprised if the market is right now starting to organize to kind of bring to people these methodologies, whether in the form of various products and or retreats, seminars, you name it, for them to, or even filters in their own computers. Like, stuff is going to happen. Even on the AI side, I feel like counter AI is going to probably happen to help us with all of it. So that's why I get a little bit worried when capitalism gets slammed for pretty much anything under the sun by some people. I'm not saying you. I get very worried because that force right there is the one that helps us, kind of recalibrate.
It's an error correction mechanism. No, here's the thing. Capitalism, like, I'm still, if I to pick of all the systems we have, I'm still all in on capitalism compared to anything else. We don't have anything, at least in history, we've not had anything better. However, as we are now reaching a point, certainly in some markets, where they are much, like in Africa, like I think it's slam dunk obvious to me that as we discussed on Win-Win the other day, for Africa, it is just buried under these layers and layers of bullshit socialist rules and bureaucracy, and it is crippling the continent. Africa is ripe for opening up, letting the free market go nuts and let people choose and develop. I'm totally on board. That's the best thing. But is that exactly what Silicon Valley? No rules, let it go, let the market go crazy. In somewhere like Silicon Valley, where, because that's the thing, the types of errors that can be made if you just let the free market go nuts in Senegal, where there's so little right now and people are so desperate, and it's almost like fresh turf. The kind of major errors that can happen are fairly capped and limited. So let it go nuts. In Silicon Valley, where they are building potentially even a new species, we don't know whether AGI, assuming AGI is possible, which we don't know, that's still uncertain, but let's assume it is. There is no consensus between the people building it, whether it is a new technology, a new tool, or an entirely new species of brand new agency and of something like almost like an alien species. We don't know. It's also a tool or a species, depending on how it goes, that the errors could infect billions of people, any errors. So we should probably have a different risk calculus in terms of like which, do we want to have no rules on the spectrum of 0 rules to crazy stupid rules? We could probably want to be somewhere else on that spectrum for Silicon Valley versus what's going on in Senegal. So that's all I'm talking about. In both of these instances, I think there's still a form of capitalism. I still think a capitalistic structure is the best way of doing these things. No one loves competition more than me. That's the thing. Like, I'm not an competition is arguably one of the best mechanisms we've had, but that doesn't mean to say that we can't design the rules of the game in smart ways. And I think we should have different rules of the game for different industries or different sectors or different, just depending on the landscape, the existing landscape already.
Yeah.
But both of those are forms of capitalism. They just might be slightly different types.
Yeah, and so for me, I think when I hear you speak, we're very much in the same line in terms of because for me, in the end, why are we doing everything that we're doing? I will be the first one to say, I'm in it at the end of the day for human flourishing, the humans of today and the humans of tomorrow. Whether I'm the ones we will never meet.
Sounds very long-termist of you.
Yeah, no, I mean, hey, I am not either way. I just want both sides to be taken care of. I don't want, this imbalance of everything here or everything there. So I just
Exactly.
is to be smart. You have to take care of you today, and also make sure you do as much as you can for your future. I'm very much on that camp. So now going back to what you're saying, because and in the end, everything that we do, to me at least, my motivation at the end of the day, I'm doing it for human flourishing. And when I talk about human flourishing, animals, Mother Earth is all in there as well, because to me it's
Yeah.
part of it's part of an ecosystem. That's why I love
Right. We can't flourish if the earth isn't flourishing.
exactly. That's why, and that's why I see a Winston, I fall in love right away. That's how it is, right? He's a Winston, your turtle. Um, so with that in mind, so if human flourishing is the goal, at least it is for me, and I believe it probably is for you as well, and
Absolutely.
many
Yeah.
people, then we have to keep that in mind. So which means, and I think that's what you're alluding to when you talk about maybe what some might perceive as they hear you talk about restrictions and or regulations. To me, my point is, I'm not about, oh, let's just go do whatever just because we can. That's really not the place I'm coming from. But the place I'm coming from is, I'm just always worried as to who gets to make the decisions as to what those restrictions and or regulations are. I traditionally trust the market to do a better job than government, because the problem I have with and the market, when the market becomes centralized, where now we've moved into from the market to now cronyism, we have the same
Right.
problem, right? So
Very centralized. Yeah.
exactly. So my problem is always in terms of who and how are the decisions being made for the collectives, right? And so
So it's exactly it's about, yeah, and that's why I think it's so much of this comes down to governance in the first
that's
place.
the right
What
word. That's
governance structures
yes,
are take the best bits of both, basically takes the best parts, maximizes freedom as much as possible, and keeps things as decentralized as much as possible, and minimizes the risk of tyranny, which is another very real risk, by the way. Also with AI, like, that's the thing, we have too much centralized control, that could be tyranny forever. Horrible, we don't want that either. So, like, how do we take the best bits from a decentralized power structure, but also take the best bits from some kind of centralized, like, again, the rules of the game. So maybe just an idea that popped into my mind as you were saying this is, like, is there a way we can use markets to help us sort of organically from the bottom up converge upon rules of the game that actually make sense for a given environment? So it's almost like a meta governance question, and I wonder how we do that. I don't know.
I mean, that's a very good equation to try and solve. But I do believe that that's the right question to ask. And so that
Yes.
is the right question to ask. And so because otherwise we start falling. And the reason why I'm so prickly about the terms that we use is because capitalism already has such a bad rap out there. If people are listening to us and they're hearing that we're making it sound like capitalism is the problem, when in fact, when you dig deep, we're going more into the concept of governance. And I love how you use the term rules of the game. I think that many more people can understand what that means. And then from there, saying that how do we establish the rules of the game? Who gets to establish them, so that we know that entrenched interests are not going to be in charge, and or because then that's where all the problems start to happen. The minute
Right.
this power is into concentrated hands, it's game over for the rest of us. Then
Right.
we have to rely on a good Samaritan, to be in charge, and then that
And
even
you might not even be able to get one. No, it's exactly. Yeah,
so because
that's
because if you have a good Samaritan, we all know power corrupts. So you start good, you end up bad. And if you
mhm.
even stay a good Samaritan, it's still not a good proposition, because the rest of the world is watching and trying to grab that power. That power is everything. Lord of the Rings, one of my favorite movies for ever. And we know what power does, and we know how it's everybody just wants it. So the safest thing is to kind of try to diffuse it. So I think our problem, and I'm glad we're talking about this, because I absolutely refuse to put capitalism to be the guilty party here. I think it's
Right.
more about the governance structure that we put in place, and to use your words, the rule of the game.
Yeah, it's the, like, meta level of it's the design, it's the landscape of the game in the first place, of which, like, capitalism run. It's almost like the operating system,
Right.
or is that maybe it's something even more fundamental than the operating system? It's like it's the philosophies of which the OS of capitalism runs on in the first place. So I guess it's some kind of like base code language. I don't know enough computer science to go further with this. Yeah, no, I'm with you, and that's why I love what like Vitalik and
Yeah.
you are thinking about with these like charter cities in Africa, because that's an opportunity to really think about the real fundamental rules of the game from the outset.
Yeah.
And strike that balance between bottom up and top down, centralized and decentralized, chaos and tyranny. Like there's thread the needle between those, and that's where you get like allowing for emergence and freedom as I do think that like as a fundamental axiom, freedom and choice has to be one of the preserved things.
Absolutely.
And then also like keeping the game, the objective of the game is to keep the game going.
Exactly.
That's winning.
Yeah, where there is room.
Infinite game.
Where there is room for it to take into account new developments. And you see, that's why even the charter cities matter so much for me, someone like me, for example, is because where in the rest of the developed nations, the US is one of them as well, where in a way law has taken over too much. I'm not saying that, again, I'm not saying that in terms of saying lawlessness versus laws. That's not what I'm saying. But the problem is, as time goes, we try to establish the rules of the game more and more into laws, and then eventually it becomes it has sclerosis. It can't move anymore. All of a sudden, now we're stuck, and all of a sudden. And you see, and so the law is stuck, but the law supposedly is the rules of the game. That's how we're allowed to move on this court. But the truth is, us humans, we keep going. We keep evolving. Culture keeps moving. Culture keeps having new things.
It's evolving.
Yeah, exactly. But the law is not able to evolve.
So that should actually be a fundamental axiom as well, is that the ability for the game's rules to be updated and evolved and reevaluated. Our mutual friend Grimes is that she was always going on about. She's like, rules, there should be an automatic sunset clause on every single rule, and people should come back and reevaluate them. Even the fund. I don't know. I still feel like the freedom and choice maybe is one of the untouchables as a fundamental axiom. I'm not sure.
On that one, we're on the same page. On that one, on the same page. So, but going back to what you were talking about, you know, they have an expiration date. So I think when it comes to laws, definitely have an expiration date or at least a review time. And also, whenever you want to put one more, see if we can take one out, at least one out, if not more. So we kind of keep it manageable. And then with a charter city, the startup cities, what my attraction to the startup cities, especially the ones that Prosper has designed, is basically not relying so much on the law to kind of determine the rules of the game, but keep the rules of the game as basic as possible. Because again, we're not talking about like lawless land here, or like the rule of the fittest and all of that crap. That's absolutely not what it is. So you have basic rules that are really solid, and that allow for cohesion to happen, but beyond that, you don't rely on law as rules. What you do is you let the power of insurance and contracts between parties to kind of determine whatever it is that they want to see. So instead of, for example, when you and I come together and we're going to enter into an engagement, what should not be happening is that almost everything we're going to do to be specified already in the law. If Magatte does this to Liv, then Liv it shouldn't be in the law, because once it's there, it's really hard to take out. It's a mess, and it stays there. And then if you have to update it, it's problematic because you have to go to Congress or the Senate, or who knows what else. Where here you keep the law very basic, because that's what really, these are the hardwired parts of the rules of the game. But then everything else, you tell people to bake it into the contract, that they're going to work out with each other, and have insurance be almost the overseer of this, because insurance will always be better than the state in terms of even watching out, making sure you know how insurance is. So that's what I love about the startup cities that at least we are building with Prospera, because it's established this way, which means you from the base from the beginning, you established it such that now the contract between you and I, the way the way we do it, it can grow with culture. It can grow with time. It can change. It can mutate. It follows us. It's malleable
Right.
along with us. And so this is more. That's why I love the startup city so much, again, because all of this stuff is being thought out. We're really looking at where we went wrong with all how far we've come, and where we kind of need to take a step back and kind of reconfigure the rules of the game. So that's really what I've been enjoying about that. It's not so much about even having, but until then, whenever we put one law, let's destroy another one so they don't keep multiplying.
Mhm.
And also each of the laws should have a review time at the very minimum, if not a time where we kick it out and start over. But I think the superior way of going is what I was just explaining about the startup cities, where the law is not, we don't put the rules into the law as much as we do now. We have basic baseline, and then the rest is baked into the contracts, and then insurance kind of plays referee. It's all
Yeah, I've
staying.
not heard that before. I like the insurance concept because it's a more efficient flow of information, I
Yeah,
think.
feedback loop. Feedback loop. And
Exactly.
so
It's a tighter feedback loop.
Mhm.
That's, I mean, again, that's a lot of the problems we have with a lot of our with these Moloch problems I keep talking about. This game theory mechanism. Part of the problem arises is when there is in asymmetric information flow between the people involved.
Yeah,
Like you've disappeared.
I'm
Can you hear
here.
me okay?
I'm here. Just keep talking. It's
Okay.
just my
All
my.
right. Yeah, like you gave the example of people not eating healthily. They're falling Coca-Cola with an excellent marketing campaign of their new really, really sugary drink.
Yeah.
Right? There's a problem there in terms that the system rewards companies for taking advantage of things that hijack our limbic systems. But then there's also the problem of the people in the first place not having sufficient control over their limbic systems to know what is good and what isn't good for them.
Right.
So that latter problem in particular is a well, I mean, that both of that gap comes from an information asymmetry.
Mm-hmm.
What is exploitation? It's exploiting people who are weaker because they have either less physical power, but also they just have less information available to them in order to make the decisions that they're optimal in their lives. A casino exploits the people who come and think that they're playing a fair game, but actually it's rigged. So it's about information flow. And one of the reasons why capitalism has been so successful is because it's one of the better models of allowing information to flow freely, but it's still not perfect. So again, how do we design the rules of the game to make sure that there is as few of these information asymmetries between everyone as possible so that everyone can actually make the best decision they can?
Yeah, it's funny. I'm smiling as I hear you talk. Why is because this morning I was interviewing Neil deGrasse Tyson for my show, and you and him talk almost about the same thing, because he was very upset about social media for his part, and then he actually used the example of the casinos, and in
Oh,
his
cool.
case, yeah, in his case, what he brought up is just like, look, he thinks the problem has to do. So at least I was worried he would say, I mean, at some point I was wondering if he was going to say that he supports censorship on behalf of people, on behalf of people's good, meaning like, if people just can't deal with the information, then we shouldn't give them so much information, which in the wrong hands, meaning the hands of those who don't know how to translate information, we should
Right.
put in their hands. So, but he fell on the fact that censorship is definitely not advisable. So we agreed on that. But for him, it's like he thinks people are poorly trained on statistics, and I totally agree with him on that.
Spot
So that's
spot
why.
the fuck on. Yeah, it's statistical illiteracy, I really think, is one of the biggest failings of our school
Yeah,
system.
yeah, that's what he
As
said.
a, as a poker player, I mean, I made my living off the fact that people were bad at stats. Like, literally, that was how I could play the game. And I remember, like, one of the most valuable concepts that poker taught me, in terms of like a sort of statistical method, is the concept of expected value.
Mm.
That the probability of an event happening multiplied by the win or lose of that event when it comes to pass
Uh-huh.
is your expected value. The most
Yes.
basic formula in the world. I did not learn that in high school, in university. I went to a great university learning a very top, like the best, it was the best physics school in the country, in the
Oh,
UK at the time.
oh,
I never learned this because it was just not, it wasn't necessary. And yet it's one of the most fundamental
yes.
forms of thinking, concepts that I now use in my life all the time, especially in poker. So
Yeah,
yeah, he's spot on that statistical literacy is one of the biggest problems.
yeah.
But and we definitely need more investment in teaching people that. I still don't know if it will be sufficient or fast enough. I'm totally on board with you that the problem of censorship is much worse and scarier than the problem of people getting hoodwinked by bad information.
Mhm. Yeah.
They're both big problems, but I still think censorship is worse, which is why I'll always defer, if in doubt, defer on free speech. Because let's look at history. What have been the worst atrocities in history, and what do they all correlate with?
Yeah.
Censorship.
Yeah, no, and that's exactly, so I think what we kind of settled on more or less this morning was because as we were talking, at some point I was worried, is he gonna promote censorship here? But eventually, I think the goal there, and again for me, I always go back to if there is going to be they make a decision for us. In this case, information was being suppressed, and Neil agreed that Facebook should not have done it that way, whether they're a private company or because for me it's not about is it a private company, is it the government, I don't care. Of course I recognize private company and I recognize government, but I don't care that whether you're private company or government. If you're private company, you're just being stupid, quite frankly, suppressing. But government suppressing, private company suppressing, both bad. And I would have liked to argue that if indeed what you want is for people to have access to better information so that they can make better decisions, we should not be suppressing the information from them. But it's like we have to address the elephant in the room, because the truth is people are going to hear about all types of stuff, especially in the information age that we're in. And for you to push it under the rug, all you're doing is you're feeding the conspiracy theories, and such. And but one thing he said, Liv, that was so important for me that I think it was great he brought it up. He was explaining the how science works and how the scientists work and how they get to establish a certain truth, and kind of helping people understand why is it that, oh, you're saying that's the truth, but how come my body said this and the guy who invented the mRNA said that. And he was saying that once scientists have gotten to a certain level of establishing a truth after it's been replicated and showing the same result by others, what happens is you keep pushing the envelope. So the scientists are always working on the bleeding edge of discovery, and it's not because you saw something that thing can be explained yet or it's even true yet, because it still needs to go through the process and replicate it in order to be for us to say it stands or doesn't. And he said the problem is those bleeding edge trials are leaking out of a lab, literally, and landing on landing on the media. And the media, as you were explaining earlier, how they treat everything for clicks. And so before you know it, you have all of this stuff that the scientists are kind of working on, or they discovered something but they don't know yet if it is a truth, or it's just they still need to discover it. And of course, all over the place, they're finding contradictory information and stuff going on. But the rest of us, we take it as this is what they discovered. They discovered that actually
Exactly.
sugar doesn't make people fat. They lied to you, whatever. And so, that's why we came to that. And but I guess so I said, this information is out there. We have to deal with it, and suppression is not the way. And he agreed. So he said, actually, what companies like Facebook should have done is create town halls. But I'm like, oh, why did we not, you know what I mean? Create town halls. And by the way, when you have those town halls, bring the people who are working on this, and also bring the bleeding edge, folks, and also bring even the crazies to the table and address the craziness, because it's out there. So I think if we can develop ways for us to, because I think that's going to, until we create better people by doing better education with kids, until then, what do we do with the adults of today? And so I think that whoever allows us to have a town hall where everything is allowed is going to work. And I think that's, for me, that's why I like the experiment of that Musk is doing with X. But we got to do something with the adults of today, because the adults of today, I do agree, we don't even know how to explain information. Whoa, this is pretty crazy. Liv, I have one more big question for you. It is, Liv, are you a feminist, modern day feminist? Are you an anti-feminist feminist? Or are you a traditionalist? Or it's complicated?
So probably a boring answer to this very good question is, I don't know if I am confident in all the various definitions of feminism to be able to allocate myself to one of them.
Okay.
So I will say this. I think it is true that women have historically had their needs capped in terms of things they've been able to do, certainly through much parts. I can't speak for other parts of the world, but in parts of Western society, it's pretty clear that, women, firstborn son, etc. There are these general societal rules which tended to mean that power was given to men more than it was given to women. Mm-hmm. And I think that's suboptimal. Mm-hmm. And so I am very grateful for the fact that me, as a fairly, I was a deep tomboy. I still am, I guess, in many forms of the definition. And I'm very grateful for the fact that I was allowed to never wear a dress, and to play with planes and cars instead of dolls, and to study physics and all of the things that would not have been available to probably even my grandmother, mm-hmm. but certainly not 100 years prior, mm-hmm. because I would have gone crazy. Mm-hmm. If I had been having to live a conventional turn of the 20th century type female life, I would have probably, I don't know what I would have done. Probably ended up in an institution or something. So very grateful for that. And I think society will benefit when you allow allow more people to add their intellectual capabilities to the world. Again, right. Why unleashing Africa is the way to go. Take the rules away, let people be entrepreneurs, etc. Right. Do I like the label feminist? Probably not, because it comes with so much baggage these days of oh, well, if you're a feminist, then you must also believe in X, and you must also believe in Y, and so on. And that annoys me. So I like to take these, with all of these sort of culture war-y type topics, I just try and define what I think through first principles, which is a loving act is that which enables people to have more choice and agency, which is why I think certainly first wave feminism seemed to do that. I believe that meritocracy or equal opportunity is more important than equal outcome. Yeah. I also believe that people have just differences in personalities, in capabilities, in interests, and it's on average, women tend to have slightly different interests. The average woman tends to have different interests to the average man, and different capabilities, whether they're physical capabilities or emotional capabilities or intellectual capabilities. There is on average differences. So those are my fundamental principles when it comes to the topic of gender. And I think we should optimize for giving people as much freedom to choose what they want, and empowering them giving them the ability to think through what it is they actually want in the first place as well. And I also think we should have a system that uses the right amount of competition and allows for meritocracy, so that people who are naturally good at one thing are more likely to end up doing it, and that we don't expect that there is going to be a perfect 50-50 gender balance. Like all the things I've typically been attracted to in my life, whether heavy metal, what were the other ones? Physics, poker in particular, have been very heavily skewed male. And people always ask me, like, why are there so few women poker players at the top? What is it? Is it the game is so sexist, or whatever their personal belief system is? That's the reason. I'm like, well, it's a combination of things.
Yeah.
Is there sexism in poker? Yes. Certainly when I got into it, there was plenty of it. Has it gotten better? Much better. Is it also true that poker as a game, as a profession, particularly high stakes poker, tends to be more appealing to men than women? Absolutely. It's a very abstract game. It's a very cutthroat, competitive game. You have to have extreme risk tolerance in terms of like willing to lose lots of money. Those are typically more male traits. And I think especially at the extremes, you're going to therefore see mostly the top end of things, it's most likely going to be people who have those types of traits, which happens to be more likely males. So long-winded way of saying, I think sex and gender differences exist in terms of sort of, there are some truth to the stereotypes. Should those stereotypes mean that therefore we should reduce people's choice and ability to do things that they want? Absolutely not. So that's my long-winded answer to that question.
So Liv, I will go ahead and declare you an anti-feminist feminist. That's also what I
Ooh, okay. Is that what that means?
Yeah. We're in the same camp as someone like Camille Paglia. She's one of my absolute favorite on these topics, if you ask me. So what it is all you women like you and I are, is we are in favor of strong women. But at the same time, we also have, we respect and have appreciation for some traditional gender roles. That's really all it is. So, yeah. So I will declare.
I was just going to say, like, I do think that society is missing a beat in terms of that. So this is not to go back to the capitalism thing, but I think this is not. It is true of all monetary systems. It's capitalism, whatever. Is we have struggled as a society to find a way to monetarily compensate typically female roles. If you look at the things in the world that tend to pay the most, they are typically more male appealing roles. Housewives, where's the payment there? Where's being a mother, being a primary school teacher? These are incredibly essential things for a functioning, healthy society. And yet they tend to come with a lower price tag. And that's something that we need to figure out better. I don't know how. I don't have any answers to that. But that's I think the people that there is truth to that. That said, I don't think, I don't know. It's still more. Is that sufficient to overcome the value of markets? No. And to ignore markets, probably not. But I don't know. I don't know what the solution is. But the solution is not getting rid of markets either. So
no. And to me, again, I'm going to go back to the markets and say that the companies that are going to be thriving more than others. See, once the market gets to this, once the signal is strong enough that the market is like, there's something here, the market goes to work. You see, for the longest time, for as long as culture had accepted, that women should just be the caretakers and through biology, let's face it, it's true. I mean, Joe Cork has his book. It's biology. It's about biology. I don't remember the title, but in any case, he makes all of this. He shows it. I mean, the same experiment that they have done in Scandinavian nations, where you have a more egalitarian type of societies, where women, going back to the concept of choice, were given a choice to be pretty much anything they want and go do whatever they want. They once again cluster towards the same type of occupations, right? And a lot of it has to do with occupations where you are taking care of another human being. So women are just more attracted to that, biologically speaking. So in any case, here what I'm saying is, for the longest time, maybe the noise was not there because culture had accepted that women, at least in the Western world, women suppressed all of that. The whole thing with Africa is another conversation you and I will have another day. You're coming back, Liv. We're going to be having so many more questions, so many more
Yeah.
conversations. But yeah, so if the signal was strong enough that there is discontent, then the market goes to work. The market is always listening for a signal. And that's what tells it, oh, this thing is ripe for us to get engaged in because there is a demand here. And if we go there,
Yes.
we'll succeed. So what I see is going to happen, that's why I have so much attraction to conscious capitalism. You and I talked about it on your show. But, where I think the conscious capitalists are the ones who are actually listening to all of these they're listening more to the social issues in the marketplace. And so I think the smart companies are going to start to address this. You're going to see, I wouldn't be very surprised that some companies are going to be super smart and even find a way to bake into their offers, like women being able to, I don't know, name it, you take a year off when you have a baby, or they find ways for you to be able to come back to work with a baby. I know that in Senegal, for example, and this is not the government with a gun to my head saying do this. It's just me being a woman who's seeing, a discrepancy and things that I don't sit well with me. We have come up with our own ways of handling, maternal leave in our company. And so, and even the fact that our ladies are able to leave anytime they want, because I don't want the children to not be able to have breastfeeding from the mom's milk, because I'm one of the people who believes that breast milk is so much better than the formula if you can avoid it. And so what do? I put that into practice. And so we have a nursery that we created that's very close to our place of work. And the mom can literally leave if she wanted to be out there, like breastfeeding her child all day long. If she wanted to do that, I literally would let her do that. But of course, what you find is people are not abusing the system. So she's leaving anytime she wants for it's a 5-minute walk. She goes, and there we have a rocking chair, we have, cribs, we have all types of things where she just takes care of a baby and she doesn't have to leave her baby.
That's awesome.
You know what I mean? So it's like things like this that we can all, this is why I love a market. The market is not waiting for some supra power to say, oh, this is what we should do. By the time those guys get involved, it's bad.
Just self-organizing.
It was
self-organizing.
self-organizing. Yeah. So so some of us are hearing the signal, maybe because we're living it. It's our life. In this case, I don't have children, but I can tell you, I feel that women's emancipation, the people who paid the most, this was where I meet Liv Boeree, the people who have paid the most for it. When people say who benefited, did women benefit or not from emancipation, women's emancipation? I'm like, you're asking the wrong question, because the people who really paid for it have been children. The fact that so many children have had to be fed on formula, don't see their parents as often as they could be seeing them, especially mom.
Raised by raised by other nannies or whatever.
Yeah. And you can say whatever you want. Mom is so important, so much more even important than dad I'm not saying absent daddy. That's not what I'm saying. But just like the mom is the one who gives physically the breast, the husband can't do that to the baby. There is a bond right there. And the child needs, and Africans know this very well. The child needs to, even this issue that people nowadays, we're talking about all of these issues around anxiety and everything. I'm not going to say that's the only thing that's causing it, but Africans, we know from day one that children, they need to smell the scent of mom, especially mom. So when you're breastfeeding them, the reason why African moms carry the child in their back, and now in the West, you guys put them in the front, but whether it's in the front or the back, it doesn't matter. What the child needs, that closure, that
they need to smell the skin.
Yeah, and they can smell you, and it calms them down. And then by the time they get to be weaned off, it's a progressive progress. So all of this stuff we don't think about. So we just said, oh, we're free to leave the house and we're free to go work, and it is all right. Of course, it is all right, but this has a price. It's all about trade-offs. So now, for me, it's like, when we talk about women having it all, we were thinking about it the wrong way. Having it all is not just about having your career, blah blah blah, but it's also what happened to the concept of a child. what are we doing about this person? And so for me, that's what I'm trying to solve. And I'm not waiting for the market to tell me what, I'm not waiting for government to come up with a
Government, right?
solution, because they'll do it wrong probably, because top down they don't
For
know.
sure.
We know better. So
For sure.
so all of this just to say, I think there's a fascinating dilemma here for the market to work out, and I think it will. The smart people in the market will do it, because now the signal is so strong. The signal is so strong. The market will respond. I know that it will respond. It's starting to respond. Again, this is another conversation, but I'm seeing people doing things differently, because they're just like, yeah, we got to organize differently, and maybe rethink about ROI, the way we think about ROI, what goes into it, and all that stuff. So I think it's going to be there, but we have to keep pushing. We have to keep pushing. All I'm saying is, we have to address the issues, but we shouldn't be saying that, what I'm worried about is government, or if it's not the government, another centralized entity making all of these decisions for the rest of us. That's what I'm scared of.
An AI. Ugh.
An AI at some point. Well, Liv, this has been a really cool conversation. Like I said, I'm going to want to have you on again. But is there anything
Happily.
for this time? Is there anything that's been on your mind? Something you've been, that we didn't go into that you would like to say, or anything?
No, not really. I would love, if I can do some shameless self-promotion, I would love people to come and also check out my podcast, Win-Win, because
Yes.
I really think you and I our audiences will overlap so much. And I'm going to say the same. I'm about to actually record the intro to ours now, because I feel like our principles are extremely aligned, and that you tend to attract the people who are aligned with your principles, right? So I think there's going to be a lot of cross-pollination in terms of people. I'm really excited to dig into yours. I can't believe you just spoke to Neil. I watched your Vitalik interview. It was great. So yeah, really, 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 really stoked. And yeah, so if people want to check that out.
Would you like for me to ask? I mean, because that's what I was thinking about. I think, like, people like that, you should be talking to them as well.
Yeah. Well, we can discuss it off camera, but yeah, that's really the only thing from my end. And yeah, like Liv, the message I try to give is try to live win-win.
Yeah.
Look for the win-wins in life, and if something doesn't smell win-winny to you, then there's probably a better option out there.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. And Liv, of course, will be sharing all of this information, with people, so that they know exactly where to go for your podcast. And we'll also share some of your work with people. Of course, any website you want them. What's the best way to get in touch with you, Liv, or to start following your work?
Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. Actually, subscribe to my YouTube is the best one. I imagine this will be up on YouTube anyway. That's where my podcast usually is. It's more like a show almost that goes up there. Yeah, that's about it, really.
Wonderful. Well, it's been a pleasure. And as you can imagine, I just have so many more. I feel like I could be talking to you for like hours and days, but we'll do that little by little. Yeah.
Do you want me to show Winston quickly?
Yes, please. Yes.
Let me go get Winston.
Mm-hmm. That way people will know why I fell in love with Winston.
He's a sleepy boy.
Oh.
I'm sorry to wait.
Oh, Winston. Hey, Winston. Oh, I saw his I saw it moving. He moved his. Hey, Winston. How are you, baby? Oh, Winston is a good boy. And Liv, how old is Winston again? I know he's more than 15 years old for now.
He's 18, I believe. We only just got him because he was our friend Tim's and Candace's for a long, long time.
Okay.
He's now our boy. And yeah, I believe he's 18 years old. We're still getting to know each other, but he's lovely. And he's very heavy. So I'm going to go put him down.
Well, thank you so much, Liv. And we will be back.
Thanks, Magatte.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah, this is awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, bye, guys.